I'm here to talk to you about Zia martial arts.
There's rumors in the Twitter sphere.
Kind of on the topic for today.
We'll have a roll on the mat.
On the mats.
Say on the mat tonight.
On the mat.
Go on the mats.
On the mat. On the mat.
So glad you could make it out tonight.
I really appreciate y'all bringing me on the show.
Good to go.
Oh, yeah!
What's up, Jamie?
Hey, how's it going? Apologize in advance for my voice. I'm a little under the weather, but happy to be here.
No, man, definitely glad you could make it. Hope you're feeling better. Definitely looking forward to you getting back on the mats.
Yes, sir.
What's up, Katie?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. All righty.
Hold on. Let me close my door, Mike. My neighbors are deciding to be really loud right now. All right. Really, really happy to be doing this one, guys. Happy Memorial Day. Hopefully you enjoyed your holiday weekend.
Absolutely. I think it's a great kind of two-topic format there: imposter syndrome, and then also promotions and belt rankings, because I think the two of them tie really well together.
Yeah, when I was first thinking about this topic, I know it was I was thinking about like calling it worried about rank or something like that, because it's something a lot of people think about, and it's a means of measuring your progression, which is very important to people. But yeah, and then I found out about imposter syndrome, and that's a pretty funny way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, I think most people's feelings of imposter syndrome, no matter what it is, whether it's jujitsu or you're a title or a position in the professional world, it's based upon other people's performances or relative to what your perceived performance or your perceived ability in that arena is.
Yeah. Katie, did you have anything on the topic when you were just thinking about it?
Yeah, I think that imposter syndrome is something that I have definitely always struggled with. And a lot of the different things that I've done, I know jiu-jitsu for sure, and I know photography for sure. And so I'm kind of excited to chit chat about it today, because I think sometimes hearing other people share stories that reflect your own can be really encouraging for people who are suffering from imposter syndrome. So I'm just really excited to have the ability to talk about it today.
Yeah, and like I said, rank is something that's on our minds a lot. It's how we kind of perceive our progression, and it's hard sometimes to see when you're talking about your game. It's hard to maybe measure that progression sometimes, and sometimes maybe we might feel that we're not making any progression at all.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes it's hard for us to recognize the progression you're making without comparing yourself to other people, which can cause even more problems, because if you go to another gym, right, and there's someone of the same belt rank as you, and then you're like, man, they know all these things I don't, it can start wearing you down, and you're like, well, shoot, I know for me personally, I start getting deep in the weeds. I'm like, am I letting my coach down? Is this a problem? Like, am I not representing Zia correctly? And it can be tough. And so I think being able to recognize that your journey is your own, and how detrimental comparing yourself to others can be, are two like really important things to remember when you're considering imposter syndrome.
Yeah, cross training, I think that's why it's so important, and I think we should, we could probably spend quite a while talking about the benefits of. Some people aren't in favor of it, but I mean, I really think that you need to cross train and get out there, train with as many people as you can, so you can get as many looks as you can, and you start to see that there's a lot of variety within the belt ranking systems.
Yeah.
Oh man, I think that. Sorry, go for it, Jamie.
I was going to say absolutely. That's huge, from school to school and person to person and whatnot. I mean, and a lot of what we base or afflict ourselves with imposter syndrome, of course, is based upon the ranks, and like, oh well, I'm a blue belt or I'm a purple belt, and I can't get beat by a white belt or a blue belt or whatever. But I've been around enough different people and to see that there is a huge disparity. And even when you don't take into account previous experience, like you can have a person that's a white belt in jujitsu that has a month of jujitsu under their belt, no pun intended, and they know zero submissions, but they're like, you know, a Division 1, Division 2 wrestler who wrestled all through grammar school, all through high school. They're not a white belt, you know. They just don't know a lot of submissions. They don't know a lot of the sport specific jujitsu stuff. But they're not going to present or be the same as a white belt. But I think one of the biggest things to look at when it comes to imposter syndrome, especially with jujitsu, is it is a lot of it's rank based. So how do we award rank, recognize rank? And I've seen in passing, like, you know, 4 different ways, and I don't know which one's the best. I could probably tell you what one I like the least.
So it's interesting when you get into talking about rank and you see that, like, 100 years ago, early 1900s, late 1800s, there wasn't a ranking system. Martial arts was still on its way over from the east to where we are, and there was a point in time where everyone wore a white belt,
Yes.
and you know, rank wasn't what we've turned it into.
Yeah,
Uh,
rank, from my understanding, rank, and I wish Robert was here. He could probably comment on it, being our, you know, our club judo expert. But rank actually came about when the Jigoro Kano exported judo to the West, and it started in France because the Western mindset was completely different than the Japanese mindset, where, like you said, everyone just wore a white belt, and if you wanted to know who the best guy in the dojo was, or in the Kodokan, as in judo, you went in there and you got on the mat and you found out pretty quickly who the best was, who the next best was, and who the new guys were. But when they exported it to, you know, the Western world, specifically France, Western people, they wanted a recognition and they wanted positive reinforcement, and that's my understanding from what I've read and what I've seen. It could be wrong. That's where the colored belt system originally came from. Was from judo in the early 1900s when they exported it to Europe.
right. Yes, I'd seen that, and I've seen even old videos of, you know, judo and jiu-jitsu masters doing demonstrations that where they're wearing white belts.
Yep.
But when because martial arts was so ingrained in the culture of the East, when you like, I like the way you put it, when you export it to the West, there has to be some type of packaging so that we can make it a better product. At some point, I think one of the biggest things was, at some point you have to differentiate who are the teachers, who are the beginners. And I think that's more importantly what the ranking system does, is kind of identifies, you know, the newer people to the seasoned people and even the instructors.
Interesting point. Like, exactly from that point is the idea of a belt ranking system, right? Was to standardize the individuals that you have in the classroom, which I thought was really interesting. Because a lot of Japanese martial arts, when they came over, did start using belt ranking systems. I'm hearing this from our resident, our resident black belt sitting right in front of me. So super interesting that he's bringing this up. But yeah, I think in itself, the idea of using a belt ranking system uh, was good in that it did kind of help to standardize everything.
Hey, which martial arts was it? I remember reading about this and hearing about this, that um, everybody started out as a white belt, and the whole reason why, like, that now black belt is like the master of the martial arts is because throughout the years your belt starts to get dirty and gets dirty, and it goes from white to black. Which martial art was that started that? I forgot.
You
I
know,
thought that was karate, to tell you the truth, from what I've heard. Like Okinawan traditional karate is what I've heard and read.
All right, we have our resident karate expert here.
yeah, awesome.
All right, so I've heard that a lot, and it is karate. I don't know if it's true though.
It's a cool story, though.
Yeah, it is a cool story. But historically, karate didn't really have belt rankings either. so in Okinawa, really like royalty were the only ones who really learned karate, and they didn't have any rankings. But when Japan, they wanted something to compete with boxing when the U.S. started coming over there. So they said, hey, well, there's a striking art over in Okinawa. Let's take that. But it looks a little bit too Chinese right now. And the Japanese didn't like that because originally karate had more Chinese influence than Japanese. And so the Japanese wanted to change it and make it more like their Japanese martial arts, like judo, Japanese jiu-jitsu. So that's where they started to standardize things. They added the rankings, things like that, and that's where Shotokan comes from. More of those Japanese martial arts, and that's where you start to see the gi and the belt rankings start getting added into it. And then it changed even more when it started coming over the U.S. when the belt rankings started to become a little bit more marketable. That's kind of a watered down version, but yeah.
Awesome, man. No, thank you. That's great, man. Always love hearing from you, and especially when we're talking about this, it's cool how we're really having a conversation not just about jiu-jitsu but about all the martial arts because it was adopted by so many of them, and I think at some point it was necessary. Let's see. Katie, did you have anything else to say about rank or imposter syndrome?
Hey, can we say something really quick, Mark?
Oh yeah, of course.
Go for Nicole.
So, like, as a non-martial art person, I just want to, give my blessing on the whole white belt thing because now it's Memorial Day, so it's now acceptable to wear it until Labor Day. So, if you just needed that perspective, like,
That's really funny. Listen, Rob, you got to bring Nicole on here all the time. Love her so much. But as far as rankings go, I think that sometimes people get rank kind of a little bit too much in their head. Again, like I think having a standardized system is great, right? Because you don't want, I mean, you can, but typically, especially if you're in the competitive realm of things, it's better to have inexperienced people going against inexperienced people, and your purple, browns, and blacks going against purple, browns, and blacks. It makes sense in that way, and trying to keep things fair. But overall, I don't think that your entire martial arts journey should be based off of what your rank is. And I think that if you're only thinking about what your belt rank is and what comes with that, you're going to find yourself pretty unhappy. You should be seeking a lot more from the martial art than just what your belt rank is. And that can really help with your imposter syndrome too.
Yeah, I agree
Bernie's-
absolutely. Because these ranks aren't absolute. I think upon it, it's maybe it's not a very completely valid comparison, but it's like if you have a master's degree from NMSU and you have a master's degree from Harvard, they're both master's degrees, but I mean, are they really the same? So in some ways, like a blue belt is not a blue belt throughout the entire world of jiu-jitsu. It's going to the standard of training and the quality of instruction and the standards that are going to be awarding that blue belt is going to be individual to the school, and in more cases, I think it's going to be individual to what the person started at, versus where they are now.
Right. One thing I think that's interesting is that we're starting to see the tradition now get molded again, that the sport is becoming so popular. I always think it's so funny that even though a lot of 10 Planet or no-gi only schools don't do gi, they still promote with belts. The belt has now become a part of the mythology and a symbol. And it's really, really cool. I think that that's continued on even as the sport is changing. I always want to ask a 10 Planet guy, what do they do with their belt? I don't know.
Probably just hang them up on the wall somewhere.
Right. I love the gi, and I think I'm always going to train the gi. I think it's just a very fun part of the sport. I think it presents more complexity as far as enjoying the art. So I think I'm always going to train the gi. But you know what? I did 3 years as a white belt and only did no gi. So like I said, everybody's journey is different, and you spend the different times at at different ranks, sometimes you get, life comes and you get roadblocked, and you spend a lot of time at one rank. I know that late into that third year as a white belt, rank was really weighing heavily on my mind because I was going to competitions and beating, you know, higher level belts, and I had zero rank, so it was something that late on, maybe third year in, really started weighing heavy on my mind.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's something that's important to you, and then you don't realize the level of importance it takes. And as you grow in not just in jujitsu, I think in other aspects of life, I find it's funny that I'll look back on all sorts of things that used to be super important to me that now don't mean that much to me at all, and vice versa. There was things that I didn't devote a lot of thought, energy, or preoccupation to that now are very important to me. And I think we evolve as people. If you never change as a person in 40, 50 years, your priorities and what your passions are, if that doesn't change, I don't know. Can't really relate with you, because I think as you grow and you're exposed to things, they should. I had a slightly different experience. Like you said, I did nothing but gi until I came to train with you guys about 2 years ago. So, and I didn't really have an interest in it, and or much of an opportunity to do it. And then I like them both equally. But as far as ranks and promotions goes, like I was saying earlier, like I've seen it done where it's just time on the mat. Basically, somebody who runs a school will look and be like, "Oh man, it's been about 2 years. That guy needs to get his blue belt," and boom, he's got a blue belt. And then I've seen the old method done applied. I've seen this applied a lot of places where it's like, hey, you got a whole stable of white belts, and you got one or two guys that beat up all the white belts. Well, you chuck them a blue belt and just call it good. And then you have a small stable of blue belts, and you got one guy who's beating up all the other blue belts. Well, we'll throw him a purple belt, which that has some defensibility in its validity, except for it's limited to the circle of people that they're training with.
Right.
They might be really good against the 8 or 12 or even 20 or 30 guys that are beneath them, but there might be a lot of techniques and a lot of, as you said, a lot of different looks from other schools that they could get very easily exposed with. And then I've also seen, not personally, but I've been exposed to it through just, doing research and the wonderful world of YouTube. And if you know Roy Dean, and then also, of course, John Jacques Machado, both of them have actually a very defined syllabus of what they want out of every rank. And they're testing, like if you look at Roy Dean, he puts his tests up on YouTube and he shows everything from blue belt up to like, I think six degree black belt tests, where he has a bunch of techniques, whether it's sweeps and takedowns and chokes and arm locks. And it gets it, like some of the tests, like the purple belt test is like 3 hours. The guy's on the mat for 3 hours, and he has to execute everything. That's about an hour ish, with a cooperative partner, and then there's a bunch of non-cooperative sparring where he'll be like, "Hey, I just want you to pass this guy's guard." That's or "Hey, I want you to hold this guy down. Do not let him get up." And that's their whole thesis is like, look, if you went to a college and you're like, "Hey, I want to get a doctorate degree," the equivalent of a black belt. If you went to Columbia University, NMSU, wherever, they would have a laid out syllabus of classes and expectations and work study and what have you that you would have to do to obtain this degree. They wouldn't tell you like, all right, just show up and start taking classes and keep doing it. And I can't tell you how long it's going to take. It kind of depends on you. And one of these days you'll get a doctorate. It's if there's something out there that has a prescribed path, there should be some way to articulate what you need to take. You know.
And I'm sure that's very helpful for a lot of people. I know, Rob. Can you share a little bit about, like, if you testing for your black belt, because that seems really similar to like what we see in judo, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so testing for your black belt for judo. So traditional judo testing for your black belt is sensei's from different schools are gonna come. They're gonna sit down and they're gonna name you throws. So you're gonna have to do all the throws, all the judo throws, and then for your first degree black belt, that's when you start doing all the judo katas. Well, I only had to do 2 katas, but I had to do all the throws. So when I tested for my black belt, my sensei, I was still a brown belt. He had me test, do all in front of another sensei. Which one was it? I think it was Robert Garcia. Yeah. So like tested in front of him. Me and my training partner did all throws, but another thing he added to my test for my black belt was so me and my partner we passed the test, but we didn't get our black belts for another year because he wanted us to teach. Like he always told me like the best way to learn is to teach. So part of this test for us, which isn't traditional, was he had us teach, just take over classes and teach, and that's what that's how I tested for my black belt.
Awesome. Katie, you want to say something about testing? I think you had a comment.
Yeah. I know that Chad had mentioned to me that when he was testing for his black belt, it was 8 hours long. His karate black belt. And then for me, when I tested for my brown belt in karate, it was a 5-hour long test. And kind of sort of similar to Rob's, I had to know, I want to say 10 different katas. And a lot of that was focused on like how well I could breathe through them, if the techniques I was doing were correct. But a lot of it was also sparring. They wanted to make sure that I would be able to do well in a self-defense scenario, and I really appreciated that. That was a really big thing in my home dojo, was making sure that what they were teaching was actually real world applicable. And so that was a really, really long, intense test, but I really appreciated it. It was something that I can look back on now and double appreciate. At the time, I was like 5'0" fighting 4 different black belts at once, and really like pretty much getting my butt whooped for the most part. But it boosted my confidence a lot because I still felt at the end of the day that I would have been able to survive, like had that been a crazy real world experience. And so our tests were also pretty, you were aware of what they were expecting of you, but we didn't have like a layout. We didn't have a sheet of things that were expected from us. You just knew that when you went in, you were supposed to be disciplined the entire time and silent the entire time. It was very intense, but really cool. In contrast to that, I think that the BJJ promotions that I've had, I really appreciate it as well, because I appreciate knowing that my coaches see what I'm doing on the mat, and they can say, "All right, I feel like you've earned the next stripe, or you've earned your next belt." And so, in contrast to going and having like a specific testing, I do think that what we do in our gym is really great as well, because knowing that my coaches can see my progress and they believe that I've bumped up to the next level. Feels really great as well. And then you don't have to worry about like scheduling times or anything like that. So I think both are really, really beneficial in their own ways.
Yeah, it helps. I mean, definitely. Like I said, 3 years into training jujitsu, rank was starting to become something that I was really taking into account. And then I didn't know what kind of forbidden fruit that was, because once I got the rank and I got my blue belt, then I dealt with imposter syndrome really hard, because I'm not only trying to learn the sport still, but I'm running the school, helping teach, still trying to learn myself. And because I hadn't done any gi, there would be white belts that would come in, 1 or 2 stripe white belts, and they would just mop the floor with me. And so blue belt was a really tough one for me. I feel like I had to grow into that. And that's something that I'd like to ask you guys. Like, what are your thoughts on growing into your belt? Like, maybe either you say, you get it, you don't deserve it, or sometimes we think that we already deserve that promotion. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, for me, when I got my blue belt, I was not ready. I was like, this is a mistake, like wrong Katie, like wrong lady. But I think, like, dude, I got home and I was like, I don't know about all this, man. Like, it's pretty serious business. Now I got some color on my belt. And I think I love that term, growing into your belt. I think for the last, let's see, I got promoted. I got my blue belt in September, and now we're in almost June. And I feel very confident now. That was a great decision on my coach's part, and that I really have grown into it. And that's something that I love that saying, dude, that growing into it. Because to be completely honest, I don't think that anyone is ever like, oh, yep, it's time to get my blue belt. And if you are, that's great. Love the confidence. But I think knowing that you might say, like, oh, I have the opportunity to grow into it, but my coaches have faith in me is really great. So I love that. I definitely feel like I've grown into it a little bit. Lots to learn still and super excited for the opportunity. But yeah, I think being able to feel confident growing into it is wonderful.
So for me, well, right now being a white belt in jiu-jitsu, I don't have imposter syndrome because I can just use the excuse, "Oh, I'm a white belt. I still don't get it." But um, when I got my judo black belt, I was I was all happy. I was all confident. I went to go compete in my first tournament as a black belt, and my only tournament as a black belt. I got my ass kicked, and for like the next 3 to 4 to 5 months, I kept thinking to myself, "Well, do I really, really deserve this black belt if I got my butt kicked that fast in the tournament?" So, but then after like teaching classes and everything, I grew into my judo black belt, but I did suffer from imposter syndrome for the first half year of having my judo black belt.
If you're a competitor, it's hard because, once you hit that rank and you start hitting those competitions, now, you could be going up against, if we're talking a blue belt, that person could be, 6 or 7 years into their martial arts journey, and maybe you're a year and a half in or 2 years in. There can be a lot of disparity there. So competing, I know, like me personally, competing at purple belt has not been kind to me. I've been getting my ass kicked at purple belt.
It's a
You
tough.
know, what was that?
I said it's a tough place to be.
It is. It's rough. Um,
My success rate I was looking at it earlier when I was getting ready for this little podcast, and I'm right an angel's breath below 50%, 50% losing and 50% winning at purple belt. So I don't think that's a great, that if I was a professional fighter, they would have cut me a long time ago.
No, I'm right around 50% overall too. And but talking about competition, I've seen white belts beat blue belts. You've seen, you see some purple belts who give, higher belts a lot of trouble. And that maybe it's due to size, strength, experience, athleticism, age. There's a lot of factors in there. So we're not
Yeah,
only
yeah,
skill, but in the
absolutely.
person.
I think that leads back into what's probably one of the biggest, I don't want to say lies because that's not a nice word to say, but one of the biggest misnomers perhaps of jujitsu is it doesn't matter how big or how strong somebody is. If you have good jujitsu, no. I honestly think, like, truthfully, with almost everything else being equal, size and strength is probably the most important thing.
Yeah. Um,
Matt, it matters a lot. Your physicality matters an enormous amount. Your agility, your athletic ability, your cardiovascular endurance, they matter big time.
Hey, Mark, Nicole has a question for you.
Absolutely. Go on, Nicole, and then we'll have CJ on.
And I promise I'm not being a smart aleck with this one. So I think the whole concept of an imposter syndrome is just, oh my gosh, it's so universal. I'm just wondering though, when do you guys feel like, I mean, obviously there's no hard answer to this, but when do you guys feel like it's imposter syndrome versus, well, you're new, and if nobody expects of you to do what someone who's been, the purple belt for 5 years and the purple belt for 5 seconds, is that really imposter syndrome to go like, oh, whoa, what have I done? And I'm going to get my butt kicked by, because you are, because you're brand new. And so I wonder at which point it really becomes just the awareness of being new and the reality of being new, And then when it really, really becomes imposter syndrome, because for me, and again, I'm the only example that I can use, I've been an NP for almost 14 years. And I'm telling you flat out, okay, just the visit with you guys, there has not been a minute that has gone by since that visit that I'm like, oh my god, did they think I'm an idiot? Oh my god, what did I do wrong? Oh god, did I disappoint them? Did I, and that I still feel the feelings of being brand new even this far out. And so I would say, oh, holy crap, I'm the definition of imposter syndrome.
That's a really great comment, and coming from your background and your experience, that's interesting that you, even though you've mastered this, you've been doing it for so long, and you're very good at it too, one of the best. Um, it's interesting. I'm not a black belt, but I'm sure that even at black belt, you're going to feel sometimes like, wow, what am I doing? And am I really at the level that I think I am? Sometimes I have to really check myself and make sure that I don't get too ahead of myself, because when I was a white belt beating blue belts and purple belts, man, I really got a huge ego, and I was like, oh well, I'm at least a purple belt. And then I put the gi on, we step into the gym, and man, there's white belts and blue belts that are just manhandling me. CJ, is your speaker on? Did you have a comment?
Awesome, thank you. I actually hit that request by accident, but now that I'm on, um, little background about myself. I've been doing jujitsu for 3 years, and the imposter syndrome actually hit me when I left my school in North Carolina and moved up here to New York City. And it definitely, just seeing the disparity between the training that I've been doing down there in North Carolina to the guys I've been training with here in New York City has been night and day, to the part where I feel like I do have imposter syndrome due to the fact that I am a blue belt, but training with these dudes up here, I feel like I'm not a blue belt. You know what I mean? So I definitely feel like it's also possibly regionally as well. Maybe where I'm at, small town, compared to over here, where you have some big time schools and you're training with individuals who 20 years my younger, true. But at the same time, it's like the sport up here, the culture of BJJ is a lot different than it is in my hometown down in North Carolina. So, yeah, I just threw that out there just because of the whole imposter syndrome just gotten to me. It's like, and hence is why it's almost to the point where I'm not saying I'm making excuses not to show up to jujitsu, but it also makes it kind of intimidating as well. It's like, man, I'm starting to get the feeling of blue belt blues. I never knew what I heard of it, but now it's actually starting to hit me as far as like the blue belt blues and the imposter syndrome.
How long have you been a blue belt?
I've been a blue belt now for 1 year. I just moved up here to New York City about a month ago, and training up here, it's the competition. It has been pretty intense. I'm talking about like you're having these white belts, who just like they're not necessarily mopping me on the floor, but it's more like I'm surviving for the most part.
Yeah, and a lot of times we feel like that's a hallmark of a white belt is, oh, I'm just, I survived that round, and you're expected to at blue belt, not just survive, but also, start attacking and capitalize on mistakes and stuff like that. And that's where a lot of this can happen, is all these expectations that come with the rank and with the belt. So I can definitely, sympathize with you there, man. I've rolled with people from New York, and you're right. The culture is different. The jujitsu scene up there compared to even like here in Las Cruces or in North Carolina, smaller towns, there's a difference if you're here or in Cali or in Brazil, New York. So hopefully it gets better for you, and I'm sure you're going to soak that up and definitely rise to the occasion.
Thanks for hopping on, man. And truly, thank you for the just complete transparency with those feelings. I know that we have lots of different people who are listening in from different areas and different belt ranks. And I think it's really great to hear people just be on here and be completely honest with what they're feeling. And I totally understand that. I know that I've been to different gyms, especially when I had first started training. when I was living up in Texas and I would travel and I'm like, oh my goodness, like what's going on? I thought I was at this level and I'm not. And so it happens, but it's really cool that you're like, you know what? I want to train, I want to get better. And I think with imposter syndrome, one of the best ways to kind of combat it is just saying, you know what? I'm going to be the best that I can be. And if you're being the best that you can be, then that's the best you can be. And that's what you want. So 10 out of 10.
Yeah, that was a good contribution, CJ. And I can tell you, from speaking for myself, I didn't. I don't want to sound arrogant. I never felt it as a blue belt, and it's probably because it took me forever to become a blue belt. So by the time I got my blue belt, I felt comfortable and I was pretty good relative to the people that I was training with. But I got a purple belt just a year ago, and it was a wonderful surprise. It was very appreciated, but it wasn't expected, and I did feel some imposter syndrome, especially being relatively new. It was like a year training at Zia, and not been at a gym where we train probably 60% of the time, not in the gi. And it kind of made me, it brought out something better in me in a way, because it's like any other type of adversity. You can either crumple underneath it, or you can rise to the occasion. It made me say, okay, you don't know anything about, you're not good at no gi, and you don't know anything about the advanced leg game that jujitsu has turned into. So you can either stay afraid and ignorant of this, or you can like delve into it and not just go to class 4 or 5 days a week and try and learn there, but you need to get on some tutorials. You need to take some privates. You need to, you know, first get to the point where you know how to, if nothing else, defend this and not just get tapped instantly when somebody attacks your legs because you don't even know what they're doing. So now you're at the stage where, okay, I can avoid this. Now it's like, okay, now I need to learn how to exploit that. And that's where I'm at now, is I'm trying to add it to my game. And in a roundabout way, what I'm saying is sometimes a little bit of imposter syndrome dumped on you, a little bit of raised expectations will make you rise to the occasion.
I love that, and I think you're right, because that's what might drag us out of our plateau.
Right. Sit in a comfort zone.
The one thing I wanted to say is, like, I know I said at the beginning, it can be hard to feel like sometimes feel like you're not making any progression, or that you're not getting better. Um, but that's not true. If you're training, you're getting better. If you're showing up, you're getting better. It might not seem like it, and you might not be able to see it, but you definitely are. The only time you're not making progression is when you're not training. So keep training, and if you keep training, I guarantee you, the light is at the end of the tunnel. You'll make it, and it's a brighter place.
I have
um,
a lot more good days than bad days training with you guys, but at least once a week, I'll have one of those days where it's like, man, I got beat up by everybody. Like everybody today just beat me up, just wiped the floor with me. Well, I mean, maybe I was tired, maybe it just wasn't my day, but I always stop and reflect on, am I better at jujitsu now than I was 365 days ago in all aspects of it, whether it's attacking, defending, awareness, your knowledge of techniques. And the truth is, I can always can empirically say, yes, I am. And that's who I'm really competing with. It's not like another purple belt or a blue belt who's really good and who's better at just about every aspect of the game than I am, even though he's just a blue belt or whatever. It's, am I better than I was last year, last month, or even last week?
yeah. Yeah, and another good practice that I would also suggest, if you have time, record your rolls, even if they're just, open mat rolls or just live rounds at the end of training. Recording your rolls helps so much to see. And man, sometimes I cringe when I see videos of white belt me, and it really, really helps me feel like I've come a long way. I know David and I. It's David's one of my favorite training partners, because we share this thing where we break down the role right after we debrief it, and some people are very good at remembering what happened in the role. And David and I always, use that as a training tool to help us get better. We immediately start deconstructing the role and talking about it. So if you don't have that, it's not something that's easy for you right now, definitely record, any of your live rounds, and you'll have that. It really helps to be able to go back and see yourself. We're we're a little bit past 9 o'clock. I did want to share another story. When I was researching this, have any of you heard of that Elio Gracie wore a blue belt at towards the end of his life? Um, that he took off his red belt, I think, and started wearing a blue belt for a while. So I heard it on a video, and then I started looking up a few other ones, and I thought it was interesting. He's done so much for the martial art, and is definitely one of the best of all time. For him to put on a blue belt, I heard different things about sport jujitsu and his thoughts on that. And maybe I was thinking we can have an episode where we talk about sport jujitsu versus, jujitsu for self defense or in a real life scenario. But so I heard that it was because he uh, he had disagreed with a lot of the sport jiu-jitsu rules, and he also wanted to go back to the original days of when he started his academy. And everyone wore white belts. The instructors wore light blue belts, and then the head instructor wore a darker, like navy blue belt.
Wow, I'd never heard that. I knew that about the belts, but I never knew that. Um, if you got a minute, I'd like to just bring up one other Helio Gracie related story that I think is very important to rank that I wish more people in the jiu-jitsu world knew about, and that's the story about John Boyd. I don't know if you. I think I told you about it briefly.
Yeah.
Yeah, John Boyd was he started jujitsu in his 40s, like in his you think he was 45 years old, and he started training at the Torrance Academy when the Gracie started, and he was actually Horian Gracie's first black belt. But he started at 45 years old. He wasn't a big guy, wasn't super athletic. He was like 150 pounds, and it took him 11 years to get his black belt. But Helio Gracie, who was like in his mid 80s, liked him so much and he tried. He wasn't a very athletic guy, but he tried really hard, was very dedicated. And Helio Gracie took such a liking to him that he did hundreds and hundreds of hours of private lessons with John Boyd. And you can look them up on YouTube. There are actually a lot of Helio Gracie's instructions later in life, and he has Henner, who is like 13 or 14, translating because Helio didn't speak any English, translating for John on the mat, saying, "Okay, he's telling you to put your elbow this side and do this and do that." But the Boyd belt story came from an interview I saw with Henner Gracie, because he was talking about belts and what do belts mean, and he talked about John Boyd was he was in his mid 50s, and he was teaching at the Torrance Academy, and he had a guy that came over there that had trained at another academy who was a blue belt, but he was you know he was 20 years younger. He was like 38, 39 years old, and he was 60 pounds heavier than John Boyd. He was like a 220-pound big blue belt, and John Boyd rolled with the guy, and he came to Henner Gracie afterwards and was very upset and was like, "Man, I couldn't submit this guy. I mean, I had nothing. All I did was survive the whole round." And he's like, "And?" He's like, "Yeah, but I'm a black belt and this guy's a blue belt." He's like, "Yeah, but he's got 60 pounds on you and he's 25 years younger than you." And that's when Henner Gracie said, "I came up with the term Boyd belt." He goes, "Because in my mind, for every 20 pounds athletic weight difference, not just big fat person weight difference," he goes, "in my mind, that's a belt. So if you got a guy who's 160 pounds who's a blue belt and a guy who's 180 pounds who's a blue belt with the same level of training, truthfully, the 160 pounder is going against the equivalent of a good purple belt." And he also added in that once you get past 30 years old, every 10 years added on is like another belt. So his whole point was it's relative. Like a blue belt isn't just a blue belt. It's relative to to your size, your age, your weight, and what have you. And the most important thing I think is your rank should reflect what your potential is and where you are, where you were, and where you could be.
I love it. I did. You told me that earlier in the week, and I almost immediately went to the next time I saw one of the blue belts at our gym that constantly kicks my ass. I asked him. I was like, "Hey man, how old are you?" And he's about 12 years younger than me, so that made me feel a lot better because that guy is. I'm a purple belt. He's a blue belt, but he's just constantly ripping my arms off. And David, did you have something to say? Glad you're on, man.
Yeah, sorry, for sure. So going to this whole belt and ranking system and how things are today, it's crazy that imposter syndrome like exists, and it's wild to me, the concept of it, because it's purely psychological in you being your hardest critic, I feel, because 150 200 years ago, when martial arts were being developed, and the Okinawans were being taken over by the mainland Japanese, there was no belt structure. You know what I mean? The white belts that they would put on was what they wore. And as they trained, the blood, the dirt, the sweat, tears, all their training and effort that was being poured into that belt, it was just what happened. The belt would change colors. It wasn't so much that, oh, okay, you can do this kata and this kata, and you're able to hold your own against these other higher belt holders. No, it was, everybody was a white belt until your white belt was no longer white.
I like that, man. And I that's why I don't wash my belt, is because my belt is full of tears. But unfortunately, most of them are mine. uh,
Hell yeah.
no, it's rough. I love what you said. We're our hardest critic all the time. No one watches us closer than we watch us, and that's a fact. But we can be really hard on ourselves. And there's been people, like, it'd be very easy for me to avoid rounds with that, young blue belt that's trying to rip my head off. But those are the rounds that make you better. Those rounds, the rounds in which you feel like you're kicking everybody's ass or you're on top of the world, that's just us enjoying the sport. I think what Bruce Lee called, natural expression of self. Um, but you, I think, like Jamie said, it helps to make you better, to really get those reality checks.
For sure. And like being able to go back and recall our roles and stuff, that actually started from karate whenever I was, studying karate in Okinawa. At the end of each training session, we would run over 4 5 6 different kata and then spar on top of it. At the end, our senseis would have us face outward away from the center of the dojo and kind of have us close our eyes, and it would be 60 to 90 seconds of just pure silence. All you hear is breathing, and you're just meditating on the things that you learned, going back over it. And we've talked about it, right? Your brain plays it in reverse. That way, when you go home and you got that subconscious thought while you dream about it, then it plays it right back the way it was supposed to be. And it helps you build that retention and build that muscle memory.
Yeah, I've definitely dabbled with that too. Meditation or some kind of shavasana, um, silence and recollection help you learn better. It helps it retain. I think Huberman has a really good video on it. Andrew Huberman on YouTube. But yeah, I think overall with rank, man, I know we can get into it, or it can get into our heads a lot. Um, I think everyone's made great points here today, and I think it's necessary. I love that it exists, but we should definitely use it wisely. Katie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I think that with a few things, I really appreciate your comment about using your rank wisely. I think it can get in your head in a positive or negative way. Again, I think what's most important is to seek to challenge yourself and understand that your journey is your own. That's, if I had to pick like a martial arts motto, your journey is your own would be my thing. And that's like, and Jamie mentioning earlier about how, every 20 pounds someone has on you and every like few years younger they are than you. I always hear that, and I definitely agree. But everyone has at least 20 pounds on me. And so if I had let that kind of get into my head, it would have been a problem. And so I instead use that as a way to challenge myself. And I think if you kind of look at how you do martial arts in that way, that you want to always seek to challenge yourself, you'll worry about imposter syndrome less and less, because every day you're seeking to challenge yourself and become better. I think it's really important to understand that there are going to be days when you might fail. There are going to be days where you're rolling with someone twice your size, and you might literally just be surviving for the entire round, and that's okay. But if you leave the mat feeling like you challenged yourself and you did the best you can do, imposter syndrome will start fading away because you're worried about your journey and not your belt color.
I love it. I love it absolutely. Um, Guys, thank you so much for all the comments. I think this was a great conversation. Definitely looking forward to it. If you guys have any ideas for future topics, let me know. Shoot me a message. Next episode's Wednesday, and we got Goyo's True Hollywood Stories. I'm really looking forward to this one. So we'll have our training partner Greg on to tell us about his jujitsu journey.